All right. So I thought I would go over what I've been using for my content security policy. So, content security policies came across my radar probably last year. Had a client, an accounting client, a CPA, um, contact me and say that they were being required to have certain implementations in place for security. And I wasn't fully aware what a content security policy was. I think I'd heard of a CSP or whatever. But anyway, so that got me to dig deeper into it. And like any new thing, what I'll do first is try it out on my website. And a content security policy, and I'll show you why I have this pulled up in just a minute. A content security policy, according to the quick reference guide, they are response headers that help reduce XSS risks on modern browsers by declaring which dynamic resources are allowed to load. So it's pretty much like some house rules for your website. So a browser requests your web page and it pulls up the information, but there are some headers that come through and say, okay, I'm going to show you everything, but there's some things, some rules we need to lay down first. So like, you're going to be able to see this, but you can only see this stuff if it's coming from this place or that kind of thing. Anyway, I recommend you look at this. It'll explain it a lot better than I can. But it tells you some things, some of the I guess they're properties or policies rather with some values. So they're telling you where scripts can come from, or styles can come from, where images can come from, and some little things like self, or whether they're coming from somewhere else, like a content delivery network, or I don't know, another server, whatever. You put in the URL that is allowed to pull in that information, and this keeps bad people, from trying to inject third-party things that shouldn't be there into your web pages maliciously. Sorry, I'm cracking my knuckles. With JavaScript, or with these XSS attacks, script attacks. And I won't go into all that because it's just, nobody needs any more of that stuff on the internet. But I'm going to show you the way I implemented it, and let's look real quick. I'm trying to think of the best way to get started, but a small side note. So the way that it's implemented, and I'm going to pull up the source of my homepage, and let's look up this thing called a nonce. So look up nonce equals. So I know this is really tiny, and can I make it bigger? I can make it bigger. So yeah, so every script element within my web page, you see even the Google Tag Manager has this nonce equals, and you get this crazy long string of characters. And you'll see that it pops up where every script is introduced, whether it is in line or within the page, or whether it references an external script file. It's going to be there. And you can see what it starts with 7017. If I refresh, now it's 15A0. It's going to change every time the page loads. So the idea is that if someone gets the idea to inject something maliciously, if it doesn't match or contain this nonce and have the matching string of characters, it's not going to allow it to run. And so someone can get something into my web page potentially, but when they refresh or try to reload the page to make it run, because they have no idea what the next nonce is going to be, they won't be able to run it. So that's pretty cool. The reason I have Lighthouse pulled up was to get that nonce to run correctly and to change every time you reload a page. I had to turn off caching. So WordPress caching is, almost synonymous with performance. Like, you have to have caching installed. And I'm on Cloudways, so I was using Breeze, and that takes advantage of their built-in varnish and all that. And I could not find a way to make the nonce to work, because it would be cached, and it would, reload the page, and the nonce would remain the same. That defeats the purpose. So, okay, I turned off caching, disabled varnish, all that, got the site to where every time a page loads, you get a new nonce. And this happened. My Lighthouse scores went up, and okay. So, like I said, I'm using Cloudways, so that's more of a premium WordPress hosting. I know, or I think it is, although it's incredibly affordable. So I have good hosting. My servers are good. The response time is good. But lo and behold, I got hundreds across the board. Now, I have complete control over my website. I was able to go in and tinker with a few things here and there to further get good scores and perfect it. So yeah, that was a nice side effect in addition to the security. And I'll show you what I did. I'm going to reset the font size on. Yeah. Okay. So if we jump over to VS Code, so this is the file that I was using, that I've, this is the result of the work that I did. And I've tried to put comments in thoroughly so that you can get an idea of how it's working. This is on Gist. You just can drop this into your functions.php file. You can put it in a plugin. You can, so this is my GeneratePress child theme. GeneratePress is awesome. But there's nothing in this specific to GeneratePress, I don't think. But in my child theme, I have a functions file, and I reference all the additional things in this Inc folder, and I can comment them in and out if I need them. You see, a lot of them I don't need anymore, and I really need to clean this thing up and post a new video about it. But anyway, GeneratePress, Generate Blocks, completely awesome. Check them out if you haven't. Links in the description. But anyway, so this is the security file that I'm linking to. So I'm generating a nonce. And if you don't know what this is, this just means that no one can access the file directly. It'll just stop. It'll exit, won't render anything else. So we're generating a nonce. We're setting an empty variable so that, again, each time this loads, it blanks it out. I don't want it to load or generate a nonce if I'm logged in as an administrator, so it won't do anything other than generate a blank nonce if I'm logged in. But there are lots of different ways to generate this string of characters. This was something I found that looked secure, so that's what I went with. You can Google it. I think WordPress has a built-in function for generating a nonce that I think will work just fine. But anyway, and this is where most of the work happens. So this is the array that contains all of the policies, at least the ones that I'm using. And then there's, I guess it's a multi-dimensional array. Is that right? And it has the values for each of those policies beneath it. And I've commented out some that I'm not using. This is really a trial and error kind of thing. So you can load this up on your site. And this is what I did. And you go and you essentially, here, let me show you. So I'm gonna, is it Connect? I think this is the one. So like Google Analytics, for example, let me just comment out all those. And I'm going to save, and I'm loading this directly to my live site, which is not really good practice. Don't do that. It should be done on a local server on your machine, or a local WordPress installation, or a staging site. But I feel fairly safe doing this. So let me pull up the inspector. And, right now all is well. Yeah, I get a warning in the console. Microsoft Edge is, blah, blah, whatever. I'm going to do a hard refresh, even though there is no, I guess the browser cache is running. And it's going to eventually give me a console error. Refuse to connect to Google Analytics because it violates the following content security policy directive: connect source, self, and I have Microsoft Clarity and Cloudways. And it's saying the fetch API for Google Analytics can't load. Yeah, because again, it's not included in my policy. So the browser is telling it, no, you cannot load. You can't do anything because you don't have permission. So this is how, through trial and error, I would go through and look at these console errors, and I would see what URLs, because I might forget something that I'm, oh, I didn't realize I was referencing Adobe fonts or Google Analytics, and I would come back here and look for the correct policy, and I would add back in the URLs and get it to work correctly. So a lot of trial and error, a lot of Googling and using the references like, let me go ahead and save that. Like this website, this was just priceless as far as, helping me understand what was going on and what policies to add and what values they need to contain. And then using an evaluator, and this is Google's, and I think there are several out there you can try, but this would help me. I'm just going to copy and paste. And it defaults to version 3, and I'm using nonce based. There's another that's hash based, and it was more involved, and it does let you use caching, I think. But anyway, I couldn't get my head around quite how it worked, so this was the better option for me. We're going to check, and it spits out what it reads as the security policies, and then I get this list. And this required trusted types is not completely supported yet. I did look into it. I encourage you to look into it, but it wasn't necessary yet because of browser compatibility issues or something like that. But coming down the pipes probably. But the rest of these, I either got, an error or, something's not quite right, it would give me a little more information within the error, and I would just go back and adjust things accordingly until I got all my green check marks. And that's how you can do it too. But again, I encourage you to do it on a staging site, or if your site is small enough and you have enough control of it and you feel comfortable with it, it's one file. It's a content security policy. And one of the reasons I like doing my setup like this is if I start getting some crazy errors and, I need to step away, I can just comment that portion out and save it to the server, and we can just forget about it for a little while until I'm ready to come back to it and work out the kinks. So this is the part that will require the most editing, because this is where all of the policies and the values are that you'll have to change to make it work on your website. But just to kind of walk through some of these, this is the bit of magic. WordPress has a send headers function, and I use that to go snag this array. And I need to convert that array to a string. So I'm going through the array, and for each of the top level values, I guess you'd say, I'm looping through and I'm adding that setting to a string variable. So that's what this is. This is my array, and I have to declare it as a global in this function so it's available. So this is the array. It has all the stuff in it. So I'm setting a blank variable for the string that I'm going to use to send as a header, and then I'm looping through the array for each item in the array. Setting as setting, and then the values. And so the first part of the string is I'm I'm adding the setting, which is like form action or image source. And then we're going through and doing another for each of the values, and we're putting those into the string as well. So values as values. So it means it's going through and adding, first it'll add, for example, when it gets to image source, it'll add self. And then it'll loop through and it'll add googleanalytics.com. Then it'll loop through and add googletagmanager.com, so on and so forth. And at the end, I'm going to tag it with a semicolon to mark the end of that policy. And in the end, we're going to have one great big long string of values that we can send as a content security policy header from WordPress. Now, these others I also found doing homework. So they're not really part of the content security policy stuff, but they did help with my Lighthouse rating, with my performance ratings. And they still have to do with security. I'm not going to go into these here, but look them up. I encourage you. Referrer policy, strict transport security, blah, blah, blah. To be honest, right now, I can't even remember what they're all for exactly, but I did at the time when I was implementing them just to kind of understand it. I should have commented more about that here, but I didn't. Sorry. But do look them up. It's easy to find information on them. Okay, and then now I need to go through and add the nonce, that long string of characters. Nonce stands for something, and again, I can't remember what it is. Google it. It's there. It's it's not anything native to WordPress. It's a common programming term. But anyway, I'm using WordPress has a relatively new filter. So when you add scripts with your theme or your plugin, you're going to use a certain filter to add those scripts. If you're using best practices, this filter can then find those and modify them on the fly as they're being rendered. But I had to do it fairly late in the game. So this is the priority for your filter in WordPress. And I did 999, do 1,000, do 2,000, whatever. I wanted to run fairly late. So I wanted to run it after I was fairly certain all of the other scripts had been added by my theme, by my plugins, whatever. And all it's doing is going through and it's telling every script element to add an attribute of nonce. So we're adding type, JavaScript, and we're telling it to add a nonce of what that CSP is, the nonce that we generated up here with this big long thing. So that's the first place that it's adding that nonce attribute to my script files. Secondly, we're using another function or a filter that WordPress has native that also will affect scripts added dynamically through your theme or your plugins. Again, we're running the priority late, so it'll catch all of them. And now we're going to use a function that I had to do a lot of searching for. This took way longer than I wanted it to, and I'm rubbing my eyes in remembrance of that frustration now, but I did get it to work. I don't know if this is the best performant way to do it, most performant way to do it. Is that how I'd say that? But it did get the job done, and it doesn't seem to be hurting things, at least on the smaller sites I've tested it with. Like I said, I use it on my site, and I've begun using it on a few client sites, maybe just 2 or 3. I can't recall which ones exactly off the top of my head. But anyway, I'm basically firing off to this function the HTML that it's including plus the nonce. So it's going to this function here. I'm using it in a couple of places. This is the last place. This is the last ditch effort to cover all the scripts that have been added. So this is the last one for using a filter with WordPress for the scripts. I'll explain that. Anyway, let's jump to the function. The function uses PHP's XML magic to actually go through the DOM elements manipulate them and then return them with whatever you've manipulated them with. And I've included links. There was a Stack Exchange that finally illuminated a way to make this happen. And it covered this function and something else. I'll show you in just a second. Anyway, so we're grabbing, or we're declaring a new document. We're loading the HTML that we've passed to this function into this value, this doc, and we're then generating a new XPath, whatever is required for XML, for the XML library in PHP. And we're going through and we're saying, load up all the script elements. And then for each one, we have them loaded into this nodes value variable. For each nodes as node, for each one of these nodes, you grab, add a nonce attribute. We're setting an attribute, add a nonce, and then add to that nonce attribute the nonce value that we pass to it up here and up here. So it's doing that, but here's the kicker. So I discovered that when you return something using the XML library, it wants to wrap it in a doc type and HTML elements and head elements and all this stuff. So you have to strip them out. So that's what this little bit does. And then finally it returns the new HTML and puts it into your the output for the page, for your template. So again, this is using another built-in filter for WordPress to grab all those scripts. Then finally we get to the catch-all. So this is to compensate for all the themes, the plugins that like echo a full script tag, script element, whether it's inline or referencing something else. So it's not being added by a WordPress filter or action or whatever you want to call it. And technically they shouldn't be adding stuff like that, but it happens and you want to cover that. So this was another trick I found in this Stack Exchange conversation where they were using output buffering and the WP footer action. So first you want to early on catch this footer action and start an output buffer and run this callback function. So then it goes over here, runs the function, and from what I understand, it's gonna run until we flush it. And so that's where this last bit comes in. We run footer one more time, but now we're gonna run it really late in the game, hoping that, and I had to tinker with this value, get it high enough to where it's gonna run after everything else. So then it runs, lastly, wraps up, replacing all these script elements, and it flushes out that buffer. And again, you're left with your newly outputted HTML with those script elements with the nonce attached. Whew. So there you go. So that probably took way too long to explain all that. And I don't even know if you wanted to know all that, but there you go. So I know I've put this on Gist, on GitHub's Gist in my library, and I'll link to it in the description. I'll also link to my child theme in the description, which I need to upload this latest version to my child theme on GitHub. And man, I hope you have as much luck with it as I did. I will say use with caution. This I'm not going to promise that it'll work miracles on your site. There are other things that affect security. There are other things that affect performance and those lighthouse scores. But this was a big revelation to me and the result of a good deal of research and work. So I wanted to share it. I hope that it benefits someone else. Again, while you're doing it, do reference this page, understand what's happening and what you're doing, and certainly use an evaluator, a tester of some kind to make sure that things are coming through as they should and there are no errors. And again, whatever site you're implementing this on, use the inspector. Errors will show up in the console and pretty clearly explain where things are going wrong and what needs to be fixed. But yeah, I've gone way too long with this. All the good YouTube stuff, subscribe, like, you know, leave comments. Let me know how this is working for y'all. If it's blowing up stuff, or if it's affecting your lighthouse scores. I'd love to hear, or even thoughts on, you know what, this is all wrong, man. You know, there's other stuff out there. There's other plugins that will do this stuff. I just thought it was a fun exercise to help me understand how to implement it myself and the way it works. So have fun developing. Enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you again soon.